Hey, what's up, y'all? It's Steve again, Harmless Rebel. Time to do a kind of I guess, a collection artist spotlight, maybe collection video. I just wanted to jump in with Riot. Riot is one of my all-time favorite bands. Um, I know a lot of people really got into them in the late 70s, early 80s, and then kind of lost interest, but they just never stopped putting out good albums, even to this day. They're still putting out fantastic music. So I just wanted to flip through the collection a little bit, talk about a couple of the albums, and we'll just kind of go from there. Again, one of my favorite bands. They got together in 74, 75, if I remember correctly. I should have pulled down the CD, but I'm not going to mess with the CDs. We're just going to look at vinyl today. But they started it in 77 with Rock City. Just an absolute 70s hard rock classic. This one is more on the 70s hard rock side. This one's a Canadian pressing on Attic. But really heavy for the 70s, though. Just a fantastic album. Singer is Guy Speranza, who was just a powerhouse singer. Probably one of my 10 all-time favorite singers. But always loved the artwork on this, minus the whole seal thing. I've talked about this with people before. I really think that the whole seal thing on the album covers is part of the reason they didn't get bigger. It just kind of, it looks kind of silly, and you'll see it gets even worse on some of the later albums. But had this been just like a menacing dude with the alien body in the background, I think this would have sold a lot better than what it did. And for such an amazing band, this is one of those bands that every metal guy that I know, especially musicians, love this band. They love Mark Reale, his guitar playing, the singing. Guy Speranza, again, was just fantastic. You had classics like Warrior and Gypsy Queen. Rock City were all just fantastic songs that are still on the set list to this day. This is like an 8 out of 10 album right there. And then they followed it up with really a 10 out of 10, and you really hear what's to come in the 80s. This was 79 when this one came out. You start hearing 80s metal, what got really popular 2 or 3 years later, and they were one of the first bands to do it. Really killer 80s style guitar, but this is Narita. Again, with Guy Speranza on vocals. And again, this could have been a really killer album. You got the sumo dude, the plane in the background, and then it's got the weird seal head, standing over the skulls. Again, could have been a really killer heavy metal hard rock looking album cover, and that seal just kind of kills it. And this is a fantastic album. There's not a bad track on here. Road Racing is still a huge hit. What else was it? Born? No, not Born to Be Wild. Waiting for the Taking's phenomenal. It's just a killer album. And again, it was kind of ahead of its time. You already had that 80s metal sound. And then they follow it up with two of the best albums of the early 80s. These two albums just do not get enough love for how good they are. They're both perfect albums. But next up, we've got Fire Down Under, which unfortunately was the final album with Guy Speranza. He ended up quitting the band after this album. But Swords and Tequila, Outlaw, Run for Your Life, Don't Hold Back. Swords and Tequila is one of the all-time great heavy metal songs. It's been covered by so many bands. Again, the silly looking seal. It just kills me, their album cover. And I honestly, because I love these albums, I kind of like it. But I really think that it hurt, when you were looking at a lot of the imagery that was showing up in the other hard rock and heavy metal bands' album covers. I think it would have looked better if this picture would have been the front cover. But a 10 out of 10 album right here. This really is just a perfect album. This is a must-have for all metalheads. Unfortunately, Guy Speranza, he decided to leave music completely. He didn't want anything to do with it. He was actually, when he left Riot, he was offered the job as the Anthrax lead singer, and he turned it down. He said he wanted nothing to do with music. And I don't think he ever did anything else again in music. He ended up dying, man, about 20 years later. I want to say 2002, 2003, he died of cancer. Next up, we have Rhett Forrester, another just one of the classic singers, just fantastic. And then they put out another perfect album. This is Restless Breed. This is another must-have for any metalhead out there. One of the best albums of '82 for sure. And there was some killer stuff coming out in '82. This one looks a little bit more menacing with the dude on the cover, but still, you got the little seal coming through. Again, CIA, Restless Breed, Lone Shark, Violent Crimes. Again, just killer album. Again, another must-have. And then, unfortunately, Elektra, from what I understand, the management changed, and the new management wasn't a fan of Riot. They wanted the new hot thing, which unfortunately was Quiet Riot. So they dumped all their money into Quiet Riot, and they dumped Riot. You know, they were hurting after that. There was an independent that basically cash funded their next album. I'm not sure how the album sells, where I could have looked it up, but I didn't. Actually, I take that. Was it that next? Did I do that right? I think next was the Riot Live EP. Was that Elektra? Yeah. So this was the last thing that was released on Elektra, was the Riot Live EP with Hard Loving Woman Showdown, Love by You, Lone Shark, Restless Breed, and Swords and Tequila. Those last three songs are three of the best Riot songs out there. You can get this for cheap. Most of these that I've shown so far, you can get for relatively cheap, under $20 in really nice condition. I still see them all the time. If you're a metalhead, you should have all of those. Next up was Born in America, which unfortunately was the last album with Rhett Forrester. Mainly because the band split up after Born in America came out. Mark Reale, who was the founding member, the guy who founded Riot, moved to Texas, and he basically broke up Riot at that point. But the last album with Rhett Forrester, who again, just an amazing talent. Born in America, again, crappy album cover. And then later that same year, you got this cover, which is actually a lot cooler. But you can barely see the Riot at the top. But I've always preferred this album cover to this one. Again, just another killer album. Can't go wrong here. And honestly, that's a theme of all of their stuff. Riot doesn't really have a bad album. There's one album that's not a favorite of mine, but I love everything else. And even their more recent albums, there's 2 or 3 songs that, had they been on the radio, would have been radio hits. They never got that kind of support, you know. Anyway, the band split up. Mark Reale moved to Texas and hooked up with 3 of the guys from SA Slayer, San Antonio Slayer, and they formed a band called Narita that was doing some Texas touring. I don't think they ever released anything. Actually, the drummer from that band from SA Slayer is in Sacred Reich now. I talked to him about SA Slayer last time I saw him. I wish I would have known ahead of time he was in SA Slayer, though, because I have some of their albums. It would have been cool to get him to sign those. But so they take a few years off. 88, he comes back with a new singer named Tony Moore. I don't think Tony Moore had done anything else at that point. I guess he was turned on to, Mark was turned on to him through some, I don't know if it was a producer or an engineer, but somebody in the studio. And he went on to do a couple albums in the 80s, and then later on he came back. But next up is Thunder Steel, which is just another 10 out of 10 album. Really killer. They changed up their sound. This is more of a US power metal sound on this one. But I absolutely love this album. This is probably my third favorite of the Riot albums. It is just fantastic. Love it, love it, love it. Another one, a must-have. The song Thunder Steel, Buried Alive, Blood Streets, Flight of the Warrior, just a killer. And then I don't know what they were thinking. Again, you've got Tony Moore. I don't know if it was Mark Reale's idea or if it was somebody in the studio, but they decided to put some like news clips in here. And sometimes it works. Some bands are able to pull that off. It just breaks up the flow of the album. It's always bothered me. The music on this album is just as good as Thunder Steel. But the breaks that they have just weren't that great. And also, I just want to point out how great this album cover is compared to all of the earlier stuff. You've got no Seal's head. That looks like a metal album cover, whereas none of the other ones prior to this look like metal. This one is kind of a cool album cover too. They do still kind of get their Seal in there on a TV screen. You know, and like I said, I get what they were going for with this album, and the music is fantastic. Unfortunately, those interludes just kind of kill it for me. My favorite song on here is probably Storming the Gates of Hell. But On Your Knees, Metal Soldiers, Runaway, all fantastic songs. Still definitely worth having. This one is shot up in price for some reason. I don't know if it's just because it didn't get, not as many got pressed. But they were back on a major label at this point. I believe it was CBS for these two. No, I'm sorry. This was, yeah, CBS Records for these two. So they made it back to the major labels. Did those two. And then Tony Moore left the band. They took another break for a couple of years. And then came back with a gentleman named Mike DeMeo. Apparently Mike DeMeo, he's done some other bands since he left. Since he left Riot, but he basically got his start from Richie Blackmore. Richie Blackmore had brought him in as a new singer. I guess they auditioned him, and the rest of the band didn't like him. So they ended up bringing back, I think they brought back Ian Gillan. But this was like a 91, 92 time frame, if I remember correctly. And Reale somehow heard about Mike and ended up bringing him into the band. And he was the longest running singer for Riot, even though most Riot fans have never heard of him before. Or you know, the early Riot fans have no idea who he was. But he did, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 albums with Riot, which is twice as many as anybody else in the band had done. So the first album that they did was Nightbreaker. I believe these were all originally released in Japan and then later released by Metal Blade. Now, these are all the ones I'm going to show you now are Metal Blade reissues that were done back in 2016, 2017 time frame. This one has had like 4 different album covers, but this is Nightbreaker. This is probably my least favorite. They're all pretty bad. There's one of a shark, like this cartoonish shark on the cover that again doesn't look like metal. It's a fantastic album though, man. There's so many good songs on here. Magic Maker, Soldier, Burn, In Your Eyes. It's just a fantastic album. And with this is kind of a mix of their sounds. You hear a little bit of that early heavy metal. You hear a little bit of the US power metal. And you hear that all through the next series of albums here. But these are all fantastic. And I highly recommend checking these out if you haven't. They're definitely worth it. And they all have really killer hit songs on them. Next up was Brethren of the Longhouse, which was 95. This one, Mark's writing was, he was basically telling the stories of Native Americans in the Americas. And other than the really crappy covers that are on all of these, none of these have the seal, but they're not a whole lot better. They're all really fuzzy covers. You can tell that they basically took the CDs and just blew it up without doing any editing at all. But I mean, if I would have seen this in the stores and just seen the Riot logo like that, I would have thought it was another band. You know, and again, you see the trend of just not very metal album covers from one of the great metal bands. Next up is Inishmore. Again, another terrible album cover. But again, some great songs. Blackwater, Watching the Signs, Red Rain. Just another fantastic album. But this one is Inishmore. The last song is a cover of Danny Boy that 100% should have been left off of this album, because it's just a cover of Danny Boy. It's not like a metal, metalled out cover, This is probably my least favorite of the Riot albums. But again, there's still some fantastic stuff on here, and it's still worth having. Next up, we're starting to see them get a little heavier again. And these next three albums are fantastic. First, we got Sons of Society. More of a metal album cover. I love the logo on this. I wish they would have used this logo on everything. So we got Sons of Society. You start to see the seal pops up again. This was 2000. When was this? Oh, I'm sorry, 1999. But just a fantastic album. This is one I really recommend. Next up is actually one of my favorites from this era of Riot. This one's called Through the Storm. Again, another crappy album cover. They changed the logo again. But this album is just a monster. It gets really heavy. The song Through the Storm is one of my favorite Riot songs. It's one of the best things that Mark ever wrote. This album's, I'd say, a 9 out of 10 on this one. It's just fantastic. And next up, Army of One. This is the last of the Mark Reale albums that I have on vinyl. Again, just another fantastic album. Army of One is a great song. Alive in the City, Stained Mirror, Shine. All killer songs on here. This one's a little bit cooler of an album cover. You've got the Les Paul with the kind of the shadow, the echo of the seal in the background. The next album to come out would be Immortal Soul. It would unfortunately be the last album with Mark Reale. That came out in 2011. Mark Reale died a few months later. In 2012, he had Crohn's disease for years, and he finally died from complications. So we all thought that was the end. And I did have Immortal Souls on vinyl. I bought it when it came out. It's only been pressed once. It's a horrible sounding pressing. I can't even, it was so loud with pops and whatnot. But there were a lot of collectors that really wanted it, so I threw it up on I don't remember if it was Discogs or eBay, and I put in the comments, it's not a good pressing, and it sold for like $150. I'm really hoping somebody represses it, because Immortal Soul is a fantastic album. Again, that's the last one with Mark Reale. So a few years passed, so that was 2011. And then 2013, it was announced that Riot was going to be back under the name Riot 5. And apparently what happened was all the members but the singer are members from various lineups of Riot over the years. And they were going to use a different name. And I guess Mark Reale's family really pushed them to use Riot. For legal reasons, they couldn't use Riot in the US, so they call it Riot 5 here. But everywhere else in the world, it's just Riot. And the two albums that they've released under the Riot 5 name are both fantastic. Both of them made my top 5 of the years they came out. So first was Unleash the Fire. This is a fantastic album. I still pull this out and listen to it all the time. Not a bad song on here. Highly recommend checking this one out. It's phenomenal. And then last but not least, this is the final album so far. They're still touring. I think they're supposed to have another album out this year or next year, but Armor of Light. Get these while you can, because both of these are starting to go up in price, but both just fantastic albums. Again, this was a top 5 for me the year it came out. There's a lot of other cool stuff. So the bootleg series is kind of rough. So they have a couple of box sets, each with like 5 or 6 CDs. Of it's live bootlegs, and it's official. It's official live bootlegs, but the first box, it's hard to listen to. I mean, it's really early. Some of them are their first couple of shows. They're just not there yet. They don't have a lot of songs yet, so it's a lot of covers and stuff. The second box is definitely a lot better because you're getting to some later stuff. You're getting to the late 70s, early 80s on that second one, and it's really good. And then they did this archive series. This archive series is fantastic. They're all absolutely killer. This is volume 1, 76 to 81. So you basically got outtakes, demos, live stuff. They all come with a really killer DVD. This one has a live CD from Long Island in like 77 or 78. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's a killer show. But each of these are 2 LPs. So you got volume 1. Then you got volume 2, which is 82 to 83. This one has some live stuff from Japan. It's not as good, the DVD. Some videos, some video interviews, and a couple of live tracks for one of the shows there. Next up, volume 3. Man, this would have been a killer album cover. And this obviously pulls from the Thunder Steel, kind of a play on the Thunder Steel album cover, but this is really cool. So Archives Volume 3, 87 to 88. So you've got the Tony Moore albums. And I forgot to mention, so it was Tony Moore, then Mike DeMeo did Nightbreed through Army of One. And then that last album with Mark Reale, Tony Moore came back, and he was the singer on that. The singer for Riot 5 was Todd Michael Hall, who was the singer for Jack Starr's Burning Star for a number of years before he joined Riot 5, where he still is today. Then we've got volume 4, 88 to 89. Again, Tony Moore. This one's really cool. So you got him doing Runaway. Smoke on the Water is a really cool cover. Racing with the Devil is fantastic. There's just some really killer stuff on all of these archives. They're all worth having. And pretty much all the archives cover the earlier stuff. This one's a little bit later, 92, so this should be DeMeo. Let's see. Oh, so this one's DeMeo on tracks 1 through 11. There's, Warrior Live from 82, which would have been Rhett Forrester, and then Rock City Live from 1980, which is Guy Speranza. But this one's really killer too. And it's Archives Volume 5. I love the album cover on this with the Tory Gates. Then we've got this one. I don't know. This one's kind of a weird one. So this is called Rare and Unreleased. It's different. It's got some of the same songs as those other comps, but it's different recordings of them. So we got alternate versions, instrumental demos, rough mixes, outtakes. I mean, this one's really cool. So this one is Rock World, Rare and Unreleased, 1987 to 1995. Again, the play on the Thunder Steel, but how cool is that album cover right there? And then last but not least from my Riot vinyl collection is Live in Japan 2018. So this is, of course, the current lineup. Again, fantastic. All the hits from throughout the career. But another one, there's one more live one I'm trying to get. They only did like 300 of them. It's another Live in Japan. I believe it's another Live in Japan. But man, they're already like $150. So I'm not going to end up getting that one. But really killer 3 LP live from, I think this was 2020. Yeah, 2020 when this one came out. So that's it. Just wanted to run through the Riot stuff real quick. Let me know what you guys think. What's your favorite album? What are your thoughts on Riot 5 and still using the name? that's it, guys. Everybody take care, and I'll see you soon.